Okay, we'll start out. Could we have your full names and your birth dates?
Saloma Ida Schroder French. I was born October the 1st, 1936.
Pauline Marie Schroeder Pelkey. August 23rd, 1938. Well, we were both born in the Vidora station.
Well, not really, Paul. You were. I was born on October the 1st, but Dad took over as caretaker for the station on the day I was born. And there was a house, it would be in behind Weber's and the hotel there. There was a house, and that's where I was born. Our dad was Hubertus Peter Schroder, and my mother was
Esther Caroline, sorry. Christensen.
Yeah. And we had one brother that was older, and he was born in 34. Conrad was his name, and he passed away in 48.
Where did you go to school?
Vidora. I went there till grade 10, and I took a year of my grade 11 in Weldon, Saskatchewan. I stayed with an aunt up there, Mom's sister, and went and took my grade 11 there. That was the end of my education.
Well, I went from grade 1 to grade 10 in Vidora, and then I went to Maple Creek for grade 11 and 12. And then I graduated from there, and then I went to Moose Jaw for Teachers College. And then I went to university in Saskatoon for summer schools, and then I completed my B.Ed in Calgary, at the University of Calgary.
And where did you teach?
I started out, my very first was at south of Shaunavon, and the district was called Chambéry, and I had 17 students, and 2 of them were older than me. Yeah, so then I went from there into East End, taught in East End for a year, and then I went up north to Cumberland House because I could make a little more money up there. So I taught there for a year. Then I came back and got married and went to Calgary, and I've been there ever since. Yeah.
And when did you retire?
In 1998. Yeah.
And what about you, Saloma? Where did you work?
Oh, my. Well, when we were in Vidora, we always helped Albert Arneson out. He delivered, he was the Imperial oil agent, so he always delivered gas, and Blod run the post office, so he needed somebody to wait. So I worked in there, and then we'd always help out in the cafe. That was, what was his name? Not Fred. Frank.
Frank and Rosemary.
Frank and Rosie in the cafe.
Some people remember her.
Yeah. So that was it until I got married, and then I never worked until I started working at the switchboard for the Consul Hotel for Agnes Johnson. And I think I just worked there maybe a year, and then I put in the power or phone lines and took out that. And then I started in '68 and worked at the co-op store for 20 years, and then I worked 5 years at the credit union. Then I come up here. We moved up, and then I started working at Kmart. I closed it down. I was 20 days short of 5 years there, in which I was very disappointed because you didn't get a very good buyout if you hadn't worked over 5 years. So I thought that was it, and then I started working at Walmart. So I worked. So I thought when I had my 70th birthday I should quit. So I quit. And guess what? I started working in the bingo hall for 5 years. So I worked there and sold Nevada tickets, which I enjoyed, and got to meet a lot of people. Now, when you walk around, you can always meet somebody. And I don't remember their names, but we always have a chat.
Yeah. Can you tell us what Vidora was like when you were young? Some of the businesses and some of the people and...
Okay.
I think the only businesses really was the cafe, Jack Sanderson's BA, Albert's Imperial,
And the store.
and the store. He had the store as
But
well.
to start with, it was run by, I don't remember who owned it before. It was Harry.
Anderson.
This Harry, he was a Chinese fellow. He ran the store. And I think that's who Albert Arneson bought it from.
I think it was Paul Bartlett that had it.
And he was over
And
there
then when Albert came back from the war, he bought it from him
and took over the post
and
office.
took over the post office. And
48, or around there, 48. There was Weber's.
oh, there was a lumber yard too.
No.
Bierman's had that.
Oh, and Bierman's had a garage.
A garage and a
There was a, like I'm, you know, where Bert and Velma lived now, well, right beside it there was it was a store, but I was too young to remember that it was a store. Can you remember what the name was?
Jack Steffens.
Jack Staffen.
When and who did you get married to? Start with Sloma.
Okay, I married Patrick French, and we were married December 52, and we had 2 children, Jim in 53, and Terry in 59, Teresa Ann, which she likes to be called, and James Phillip.
Yeah.
Patty's middle name was Patrick Richard Phillip.
We were married on July 27th of 1959, and then I moved to Calgary, and we have 4 children, Kim, Rod, Shelley, and Gail. Got to keep them all straight.
Yes, well, Jim never married, as we all know. So Terry married Randy Stockey, and they have 3 boys.
Okay, when you were growing up in Vidora, what were some of the clubs and things that you had?
Ernest Anderson set up a sunshine club for the girls, and we did all kinds of crafts. She taught us to embroider with silk, and we did shell pictures and painting pictures and
Knitting.
knitting.
She didn't. We didn't.
Nobody could succeed in showing me how to crochet, so that never happened. And then Edna Bierman, she would do, when she came after she taught us, she stayed in Vidora, and she did the sewing part. So we all made aprons over at Edna Bierman's.
Yeah.
Can you add anything to that?
Well, and then our crafts, we would have the Consul Vidora, there I go, Vidora Women's Club. They had their community club, and in the fall they always had a bazaar, and we would take our things there and sell. And then at that evening they always had, well then it was a fowl supper, it was chicken. And
What other things did you do for entertainment?
we were just talking about that. We would gather in the summertime, we would all gather around the hall because we only had a few lights around town, and there was always that main light right beside the hall, and we'd play games, Run Sheep Run and whatever, and games. That was and then the skating rink was down by the station, just right where we lived, and we had that flowing well.
Well, Friday afternoons we could get to play baseball afternoon. That was summertime thing.
Yeah.
Teachers never came out. They stayed in the school. I think they peeked out the windows and that was it.
See if we weren't.
Yeah,
But you would go out and you would choose up sides.
you probably did that too, right?
You did choose. And anyway, so it always started with the older ones. We had 2 captains, and you know how you'd go down. But of course, us being the littler ones, we were always the last ones picked. And Polly and I must have been on the same team.
Yeah.
But
I can remember the incident, but
of course, you'd hit the ball and probably go 4 feet or something, whatever. You know, we were kids. And so anyway, Pauline was always the last batter.
I was the shortest.
And she was short, and of course the smallest. And so anyway, I can still see it. for some reason, she did hit the ball, but, you know, probably 2 feet or 3 feet. And, of course, they were being smart, whoever was the pitcher and the first baseman, and they were fooling around. Well, she ended up getting to first base. Well, the next batter was the captain, so it was Jim Lane. So, of course, he hits a home run. So there's Pauline on first base. She's starting to run, and he comes and he picks her up, takes her all the way around the bases.
So I made my first home run.
I can still see that.
As soon as she mentioned it, I can remember it.
Yeah, he just picked her up and he just ran around the bases with her. Well, she was probably only about so high.
Okay, can you tell us about some of the people in Vidora?
Yes.
Some like Mrs. Sankey, for an example.
Well, I always remember her. She had a big garden and a big dog, and I never liked to be near dogs. So you skirted their place because she always wore this pointed hat, the big brim, and long dresses, and everybody thought she was a witch. And so they didn't go up near her. But then Tom Lewis used to take up all her mail and get her groceries. She used to walk to the store once in a while, if I remember right. But anyway, they moved to Maple Creek, they asked me if I would do it. Well, my first trip in, I thought, oh my gosh. But she was the kindest, nicest lady that you could ever meet. And I got paid $2 a month for getting her groceries and her mail for a month. And then when I worked at Albert's store, I got $2 a week. So I was rich.
Yeah.
What about John Russell? What kind
Oh,
of a
we
man
forgot
was
about
he?
him, the blacksmith.
Yeah, he was a kind man, but he more or less stayed to himself.
He had been married. I'm sure his wife probably passed away like most of them did back then from childbirth. But yeah, he had Angora rabbits, and we used to go over and check out the rabbits. And
Erna and Jack.
Erna and Jack were so good to us.
Every Christmas, Erna would bring down, or Jack would bring it, but we got a little gift from her and some Christmas baking. And Jack, because we lived at the bottom of the hill, well, his garage had the gas pumps there and that. And if you were walking by and you get by, and then he'd holler your name and you'd turn around and here's a nickel or here's a dime, go buy yourself a chocolate bar. Well, it didn't stay long in our hands. But, you wouldn't even, just out of the blue, he'd be walking by.
Yeah.
Because I know we wouldn't dare ask for things like that, or we'd have been whipped when we got home. But they were very good. And then Ed and Bill were always, the Biermans were always good to us. They would bring things in to us. And
then there'd be Crosons and Ellingsons.
Kids don't know what it's like to play anymore.
Yeah.
We were never in the house.
No.
Yeah. Oh, and we used to play ante-I over Jack's tin shed, or the BA, where Lloyd Darling delivered.
Yeah.
By the hour until you couldn't see the ball coming over. But then there was that 9 o'clock curfew, so you run like heck for home.
It was,
Yeah.
And there was other people's, Mr. and Mrs. Hanson, Paul Hanson's. I don't know if you remember them. Do you? No, they lived across the road from Raby's.
Yeah.
And we would go out there a lot of Sundays. And, of course, Pauline and I would go out and ride everything that was out there pretending. She was the best cook. I thought she was.
She was a good cook, I'm telling you.
But she'd make waffles. And, of course, us greedy little kids, we each had to put a waffle on our plate. And I would try and fill every hole with butter. And when I think about it, that poor lady, she had to churn this butter and milk the cows. And here I am.
Oh, yeah.
And for the syrup.
Well, the women in Vidora, of course, had that birthday party thing going. Just the ladies. If it was Mrs. So-and-so's birthday, they all threw in a quarter and they'd buy. I can remember them buying, if they needed dishes or something, they might get plates.
Or a casserole.
A casserole dish or something. It wasn't mine.
Weber's,
but Weber's
store had always nice.
That was a little spooky place at times, but.
I love that store.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
it was. It was a good store.
Yeah. But, and
Having
speaking of Mr.
housewares.
Sankey, he had that long beard, which was sort of scary, too. And he wore a black hat, like a pilgrim almost. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah.
What about electricity, like the power? Did they have a power plant, or how did they do that?
Yeah, it was a power plant. I don't know what time it would be in the evening. I suppose they went with the weather, like if it was dark, or they went with the weather. And I thought it was turned off at 9 o'clock, but Pauline thinks that maybe it was 10. And then on Monday morning it was turned on for those that had power to wash clothes, and Tuesday afternoon to iron. They could do their ironing.
And then there was no power any other time of the day then?
No, and dances or anything in the hall, then they would turn on the power for
Well,
that.
the reason I remembered that it was on a little longer because at 9 o'clock we had the curfew. And at first it was John Russell that used to come up, and we had this triangle thing, and they would bang the liver out of it, and we'd all just break what we were doing and run for our lives home. And but then she said Jim Palmer did it after that. He did the plant, like started the plant. But the station never had power. We couldn't even use a gas light. We had to use coal oil lights. It was a rule.
Yeah.
And the flat irons. That was it. Yeah.
What would have happened had you not gone home at 9 o'clock?
Oh, there was a fine.
Oh.
But I can't remember just exactly, but there was nobody out after.
Nobody walked the streets after 9.
And another thing was, in the wintertime, we had the hill
Going down.
and sleigh riding and skating, which we enjoyed.
Did you have an outside rink?
Yeah.
Did somebody make a rink?
Yeah,
Yeah.
these
That
guys.
had to have been there for
They-
quite a while.
Yeah, as long as I could remember that there was that skating rink there. Then finally they moved in an
Bierman's
old-
moved in. Yeah.
old building, and they had a stove in there, and at least you could go in and but we lived just across the way from it, so it was
Yeah.
okay for us.
Was there a dance hall or a theater in
Dan-
Vidora?
Dance hall.
Yes, the hall that's in Console is the old Vidora Hall. The senior center.
Senior center, that's Fedora Hall, yeah.
Oh,
Lots of Christmas concerts in there.
dances. And I think we gave you the orchestras that used to play there.
Archie Smiley, Bill Brown, and George Cunningham. But I don't know what he lived in Robsart, but I can't remember what his occupation was there.
And then,
They called themselves the ABCs.
and then Shepherds always came down to play for our Saturday night dances. It was Tommy Shepherds, right? The Senators played occasionally.
Yeah, Carl and Margaret.
And then Carl and Margaret did a...
Kurt Bowaski played with them, but they always had different people playing, but they played for both of our wedding dances, Carl and Margaret.
And both your wedding dances were in Vidora?
No, Sloma's was Vidora. Ours was in
Yours in
Console.
Console.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I know the other one was McKelvey, the one that
Merle McKelvey.
Merle?
Merle used to play
That's right, he came because Bunty was always there at the dances.
with. Yeah.
What about church? Was there a Catholic church in Vidora?
No,
No, Senate was the closest
So you would go to Senate to church?
oh yes,
in our little Model T.
the old
coupe.
Model T. But there was a Brethren church in Vidora, and that's where all the weddings and everything, funerals and that.
Yeah.
We never had a minister as such.
Not that we remember, but
Yeah.
then they had, eventually, these student ministers came up from the States. Actually, they boarded with us.
Well, Ella Crowson married Richard Nolt, and he was one of the student ministers that stayed with
Oh,
us.
really?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And he came from, I think he came from Indiana,
yeah.
if I remember right.
think
But anyway,
so.
and then we had another minister, student minister. He only lasted about, we were discussing this.
3
He's
weeks.
lucky if he stayed 3 weeks.
Yes.
He was homesick.
Well, can you imagine?
Oh, yeah.
Coming
Yeah.
from- yeah.
But that Brethren church has moved out to,
Melvin Ziegler, I think.
Melvin Ziegler bought it.
Wherever
Yeah.
his place
Well,
is.
didn't that turn into the Church of God in town?
Those people turned to they
Church
were
of God.
all brethrens, like all of those, the
Swihards
Zieglers,
and all of them, they were brethren.
Swihards, and them were all brethrens. then that was when I can remember there was still some, like the Zieglers, they were another one. The Ziegler's dad was a minister.
No, I'm pretty sure you're right about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and the Elmer Palmers, they were brethren.
But we
So
could
some
go
of
to
them-
their Sunday schools
Yeah,
in the summer.
winter.
winter,
Yeah,
yeah.
if we
Yeah.
would go up there for Sunday school. Yeah, we would
Well, Strickers,
Strickers.
that where Eccles lives now,
Or they did.
where Eccles lived, that's who used to come over, and she used to teach us the Bible camp. Yeah. Oh, and we had Charlie Gibbs. That was the other one.
Yeah, that was another one.
What about the Christmas concerts?
Yeah, well, we would practice, you know. You would practice, and then the last week or so you would go to the hall, and that's all we did was practice. They always had that drill, you know, where had the long gowns and
Crepe paper
paper
gowns.
gowns and whatnot. And we're always in little plays and
Yeah.
recited poems. And
Santa Claus came.
Who I was frightened of from the day they walked in. We knew who they were, but just thought of them bouncing up the middle of it.
When you were kids, was Vidora a very big town? Like, was there quite a few people lived there, or?
yeah, there was, to us, for a village there, you know, I can remember, well, there was Cor and Bill McGee lived there, and there was Jack and Erna.
Yeah.
There was a bachelor, Martin.
Oh,
Martins.
Martin Martinson. Where
He
did he go?
died in
Oh,
that house.
Was that what
I
happened?
remember him dying. Grandpa saying that, well, old Martin Martinson died last night. That's all I remember.
Is that remember?
I don't know.
Yeah, well, Doc Johnson, that's the house your grandpa
They lived in that.
lived in it. And
Yeah.
he was the one that delivered me, was
Doc Johnson.
Doc Johnson. Put me in a shoebox and said if she lives till morning, she'll make it.
You were premature.
I guess so. I only, well, by the fish scale, I weighed 4 pounds. Yeah, and they always tell me, they put me in this shoebox, you wrap me in cotton batting, and said if she makes it till morning, she'll make it all night for the rest of her life, and here I am.
Who other people were there that had kids your age that
Oh, yeah.
you played with? Who were some of the families?
Yeah, there was
Well,
the Watsons,
the Lewises.
the Lewises. Well, Janice lived out of town, but we were always...
The Biermans, yeah. They,
When the Browns moved in.
Browns moved in, the Ellingsons,
Ellingsons.
and Natalie McGee, she came to school there. The Crosons.
And the Croson kids. Yeah, we were...
Ronald and Olivia Field were there for a while, till they moved to Robsart.
Yeah, when their dad come out of the service.
Yeah. Oh, let's see, I gotta look up and down the street. No, Ken Sanderson and Jerry McGee. Well,
Yeah.
you would know the McGees, yeah. Yeah. And that was about it. There were 30 students in 19. When did we read it today?
Yeah.
30 students in the late 40s. So,
And usually the only ones that lived out of town were the Swiharts and Bierman kids.
oh yeah, Rosemary Palmer, she came up the hill.
Rosemary and Edward, yeah,
Yeah.
came to school then.
So when did you move to Council?
We moved in 55, the fall of 55. The only way I can remember is Jim was 2 years old.
What did you do in Council for entertainment? Like, what were some of the things that went on?
Well, back then we did play, like, the ball in the summertime. We did play ball. And then there was the shows, Saturday night shows and dances. That was about... I did join the ladies' club, the Council Women's Club, and we put on plays. We put on 2 different plays there. Was in them, and, you know, just, I don't know, you were always busy, but
Yeah. What about you, Pauline, when you moved to the city? What did you do for entertainment?
Oh, we'd go to movies, and you know, if there was something special on, we would go down to the different, you know, venues and have them. But go to the Stampede.
Jim, can you tell us a little bit about Grandpa and Grandma French?
Came from a very complicated family, a very big family, and obviously one that never wanted to leave Ireland. And so they left the south of Ireland to the north of Ireland, where they worked on the Titanic.
Oh, really?
And some of the family may have moved to Liverpool. And their claim to fame maybe is that they are McCartneys and related to Paul McCartney. But anyways, some of them did come to the States, and Grandpa and his brother John, who was older than him and had kids the same age as my grandfather, came to Consell, and they both homesteaded. And Billy's land is John French's homestead. Not my Uncle John, but my grandfather's brother. My grandfather was married to Jim Murray's sister. And what was her name? Ellen? Ellen. And so my grandfather actually had a picture before the flood in Maple Creek. He was a bartender in the commercial hotel, and he's the bartender behind that beautiful bar that they have that picture of. And he was there and somehow connected with the CPR. And then all his brothers, or some of his brothers from the States, most of them, came, and they worked on the CPR, but only this John and my grandfather homesteaded for whatever reason. They worked on the CPR. My Uncle Tom always claimed that he could, when he came to Vidora, the grass was 3 feet high. I don't know if the grass was ever 3 feet high. But being Frenches, sometimes they looked at the grass from the down up. And, but anyway, where they homesteaded on the south line of the railroad, and being the firemen and the engineers as well as the crew, they would go to Senate to church, and so they were there. This John French had a son named Joe who married a Zentner, and another woman named Annie, another sister named Annie, who married a person in Maryflat named Bowen, and another sister that married my grandmother's brother, which may sound like Arkansas, but it was legal. So named Bells. And the lady in Maryflat was always known as Annie French, so Grandma was always known by her maiden name, Annie Bell. And she came over with this Tina from Ireland after in 1924 or something. And they came here. Meanwhile, the older John French and all the other Frenches moved to Trail to work in the smelter, and Grandpa French moved his homestead to where John French is, and that's where Billy is. And his land was there, and in the PFRA pasture, what is it, number 1, Arena? That's where his land was, inside of there. Okay, Reno pasture. So that is sort of how they got up. They had 3 boys, getting a pattern, I guess, for Terry. They were all 3 years apart, Patty, Joe, and John.
Was this his first wife that had the 3?
No, this was Grandma French. She died in childbirth.
Oh.
Somewhere in there. Grandma actually came supposedly interested in a brother named George. But Grandpa French went to meet the train at wherever they came to, and Lethbridge, and so he ended up married to her. And George became a priest. Eventually, the old Grandma French came over, and she is the one who had the French look. So the looks, whatever Frenches look like, she is the one where they got those genes from. And her name was McCartney, so there may be some credence to my cousin's story about the Beatles. But they had a pretty rough life. The school there was closed in the summer, or closed in the winter, and they went in the summer. But they did snowplow the road, and they went to the Govenlock dance every year. There's a story. And apparently, somebody recounted this to me, that as the people came into Govenlock, the 3 Frenches, Grandma French, Annie French from Mary Flat, and Tina, they would all get in a corner of the hall, and once they were there, the orchestra would know, and they would play an Irish jig, and they would Irish jig for the crowd.
I remember your grandma Irish jigging.
Yeah.
Tried to teach us.
She was quite a hefty woman, and so I don't really, her legs went or something, so she never, but also that was the other thing they said, that they used to have races at the 1st of July just so people could watch her run. She was supposedly a very fast runner. And her and I guess it was Nellie Sanderson and whatever would race. So that was basically their family. Grandma French lived in town, or would come into town then later to go to school, so the kids could go to school. She was very proud of working at the restaurant, and she commented once to me about, in our mixed environment that that we now live in, that a ship came into Belfast Harbour with a Chinese cook, and all the children were locked up in their houses. And then she commented how when she came over here, she worked in the restaurant for the, what they called them, and she was quite proud of how wide her world would been.
Yeah.
I always asked her if she would ever go back to Ireland. She said no, I'd never come back. She said, and I couldn't not do that. But her voice, she had the Irish brogue, and people loved her. Loved to hear her talk. She swore like a trooper. She was quite the lady. She was the center of attention wherever she was.
Okay, now could you tell us something about your family, your parents?
Mom and Dad.
Yeah. Well, Dad, because we were only 12 when Dad passed away. So your history is just. He did come from. Well, he was born in Germany.
There's 14 in his family, and they immigrated to Wisconsin area in the States, and then Dad, because of his asthma and the dampness, he couldn't live there, so then he came out to North Dakota. I don't remember the exact.
No, I don't either spot.
Anyway, and he came then when they were doing homesteads, and they came up, and then when he came up, he took out a homestead, but in the meantime, he helped build the, Sloma's got a picture here, helped build the Moose Jaw Hotel.
He was a very good carpenter. But
Yeah.
He used to build us dressers,
Yeah.
but his health was.
Yeah, his asthma. He used to paint the post down at Willow Creek.
Painter. He's a good painter, yeah.
Yeah, he would paint and fix anything there. Yeah. So he did a lot of, when he felt good, that's when he worked.
Sharpened saws. I remember him sharpening saws. People would bring their saws in to be sharpened. I can remember that.
Yeah.
Mom was.
She was born in North Dakota.
Yeah, Kenmore, North Dakota.
But her
I don't. We
grandma and grandpa both came from Norway. He came first. I think I read it 1909 or something, and then she came in 10. And then they were married in North Dakota, and then they moved up to Robsart. So they always lived south of the Robsart area. Then our grandmother took off with Gunner Fall, and Grandpa moved up north, and Mom and Carl stayed. The two oldest stayed here. And then she married Dad in 36, and yeah, he passed away in 49, and then she went to Maple Creek. She worked out. She worked for Tittles, and she worked for all kinds of people in the area. They needed somebody for a month or two. They would call on Mom. Often no wages given to her, but she would go. Yeah, yeah. She was always, and we were sort of talking that one day, and we never heard her being upset with anybody. Everybody was good. Everybody was good. Yeah. So then she married Elmer Taylor there in Maple Creek. And when he passed away, she was in the lodge, Manor. Gosh. Well, we put down their wages because we were talking about that. Terry asked her how much she made an hour.
Yeah, what is the comparison for when you started to now?
Well, it was 75 cents an hour when I started working for Agnes at the phone, and the store was 75 cents an hour.
Yeah.
That's
What
we
about you when you started teaching?
When I started teaching, I made $1,500 for the year. And we were paid 10 months. And with income tax and everything taken off, and then I had to pay $60 for room and board. And I don't know how I did it, but I managed to save money to go and pay my tuition and go to university in Saskatoon for the summer. And then you didn't get another paycheck till the end of September. But I got $1,500. That was it for the year. And that's when I went up north and made more money. I got a whole $3,500 a year.
What was it like working in the telephone office, like when you worked for Mrs. Johnson?
The
Like
switchboard.
the difference between the telephone then and the telephone now?
Well, yeah, like they had the switchboard, and if the phone rang, or somebody would ring in, well, then you had this little thing you plugged in and had your earphones, I guess you would call them, and get the headphones and get the number. And there was a few phones up, that were around in the community then.
The business ones mostly, wasn't it?
Yeah, and some out of town too.
I can remember.
That's when they started.
Yeah, I remember phoning her to Hester's from Moose Jaw.
Oh,
Yeah.
Hester's had it, yeah.
And Dorothy. Well, it'll probably be about an hour before I can get her, but that'll be $1. And I'm thinking, you could go out your back door and holler and she'd hear you, But
Yeah, then when I started, there was a few local phones.
yeah, but I'll never forget that. I thought it's costing more than the telephone call. Yeah.
Do you use the computer a lot?
I don't touch a computer.
Oh,
No, I'm totally turned off them. I don't know. Well, we had a fellow come around and he was trying to teach everybody, but if you couldn't type, forget about it. And then he'd say, "Oh, just push F2." Well, that was the old computers. So yeah, no, I've never had a desire for computers.
Selma, do you use a computer?
No, I don't. Actually, because I'm volunteering at the Red Cross, I had to learn a little bit. But I did take a typing course
Advantage.
in Consul. I forget who taught it. I think it was Davis. He was the principal. But if you don't
You don't type.
you don't use it, and so I did start to know where the keys were. So when I started at the Red Cross, I said, well, I'll volunteer, but I've never touched a computer. That's okay, we'll teach you. And they've been very good with me. I can make lots of boo-boos, but
Oh yeah.
just holler at somebody, I need help.
What about curling? Did you do lots of it when you were in? Well, I know you curled.
I enjoyed it, I really did. That was the only sport I really enjoyed. Still love it.
Yeah.
Do you still curl?
No, I can't anymore, but I curled up until I broke my wrist.
Talk about building the rink.
Yeah, building the rink. I was on that committee that helped, won the committee, and we worked to get,
How did you raise money to build the rink?
we put on bingos, we did just anything that we could think of, suppers, and then people would donate, and eventually got enough money to build it.
And what year was that in?
It was in 58.
And that was natural ice then, wasn't
Natural ice, yeah.
it? And how did you meet Scotty, Pauline?
No, at Consul. Yeah. At a dance.
And
Yeah.
what was his connection to the community?
Well, his life was pretty much when his mother died in the fire. After the fire, then they were all scattered. And then they came back. They went to Detroit. He did his grade, I think, 10. He loved his times in Consul, though. He did. He really liked Consul. And he always told me he won that when he was the what did they have? The calf show?
4-H beef.
The 4-H. And Heck bought them, Uncle Heck bought them each a calf from Mrs. Gallister. And he got the top prize. And Donna, I think, got second or third, his sister. And then they went to live with their dad in Detroit, but that didn't pan out. And then he came back and lived with Lena and all around, and he did all kinds of odd jobs there and on the oil wells. He did the pipeline that went through Maple Creek, the Trans-Canada pipeline. He worked on that. And then when he went to Calgary, he worked in a plastic plant, and then he went to the post office. Yeah, so that was his career. But no, they got pretty scattered about. But I said always, we have to thank Aunt Lena. She kept that family. She always wrote. She always kept them informed of every one of the brothers and sisters. And
what are some of the things that you do in the city now for entertainment and to keep yourself busy?
I started bowling the fall we moved up here, and I'm still bowling.
yeah,
So it's 30 weeks. It starts in September to April, and I've enjoyed it. I'm not a good bowler, but nobody cares.
It don't matter.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. It's fun. And after I quit working at the bingo hall, and a year at home, and then I started volunteering at the Red Cross.
yeah.
I do Monday and Tuesday mornings. I like mornings to volunteer, and I've enjoyed it. And they're always good people to work for down there.
Yeah,
And there again, you get to meet a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And cards. Oh yeah, and then I play cards with these ladies that once a month get together. There's Mita, Luella, and Francie Johnson, Marge Johnson, Barbara Wilson, and myself. There's 6 of us ladies.
Oh, well, I belong to the Teachers Association, and they have all kinds of activities. I don't go to all of them, but I sort of pick and choose, and then they always have meetings and luncheons, and I go to those. And then we joined this 50-plus club, and we meet every Friday morning except for summers. And it's just a group of people down at the rec center that's where we go. And well, Scotty hasn't been able to do too much, so we have to sort of restrict that. And we go to movies, and then we play cards with ladies.
To close it off, what is the biggest change that you've seen over your lifetime? What's the biggest thing? And what do you think is going to happen in another 50 years?
I say good luck to the country. I really do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I always think of the next generation.
Yeah.
It bothers me, really.
Yeah.
Our grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
I think technology has gone. It's wonderful, but I think
Yeah, it's
nothing is private anymore. Your life isn't private. Nothing.
Yeah.
And I don't know. No, but
Yeah.
I think we have lived a good life. I think we lived in a good generation. No complaints.
No.
But that's one of the things. I wonder what the world is really going to be like in 50 years.
My Uncle Tom always claimed that he could, when he came to Vidora, the grass was 3 feet high. I don't know if the grass was ever 3 feet high, but being French, sometimes they looked at the grass from the down up.